A single gunshot shattered the quiet night in Virginia. Officer Raymond Cole pulled the trigger on a black man who never raised a weapon. But when the man's ID hit the ground, it revealed three words that froze every cop in sight: Central Intelligence Agency. Within minutes, Pentagon choppers swarmed the scene. What kind of truth could make a government move that fast? If this moment gripped, you hit like and share it with someone who believes in justice. Now let's step into the night where it all began. I remember the rain first. Not a gentle drizzle, but a steady sheet that turned the blacktop into a mirror and made every light smear like wet paint. It was close to midnight on the edge of a Virginia highway, the kind of quiet that swallows sound. I'd pulled into a lonely gas station for coffee and a second to rub my eyes. That's when the black SUV coasted in no plates, windows damp, with fog engine purring like it didn't want to be noticed. I didn't know the driver then. I only saw a man step out, tall, black, in a dark suit that took the rain like it was nothing. He moved like someone who measured each second before he gave it away. Later, I would learn his name: Marcus Hale, 42, Deputy Director of Counterintelligence at the CIA. But right there, he was just a quiet figure under a flickering canopy light, the rain stitching silver threads between his shoulders and the ground. The station was empty except for me and the clerk, a kid with headphones who never looked up. Across the lot, a cruiser rolled past on the shoulder, slowed, then eased its way into the station. Patrol lights weren't on, but the presence was loud. The driver's door swung open. A white officer stepped out, square jaw, tight grip on a flashlight, like it was proof he belonged everywhere. Officer Raymond Cole. I didn't know that name either. In a different life, maybe I wouldn't have cared. But once you see a night break, you remember every crack. Cole said something into his radio and closed the gap fast. The rain made a soft hiss on the canopy. His boots made a harder sound. He looked at the SUV, then at Marcus, then back at the SUV, like the metal itself was suspicious. I could feel the air tighten the way it does before a fire alarm screams. Evening. Cole called, though there wasn't any warmth in it. Suspicious vehicle. Marcus didn't flinch. He turned slightly, palms empty and low. His voice, when it came, was even the kind you lean in to hear because it doesn't waste breath. Good evening, officer. Cole swept the flashlight up and down like a judge deciding a sentence. He stepped closer than he needed to. The rain had a rhythm. His voice cut across it. You people think you own the road now. A line like that doesn't start a conversation. It sets a trap. Marcus didn't take it. He met Cole's stare without climbing into it. You don't want to do this. I remember those words because of how they sounded, not a threat, not a plea. A warning, almost kind. They didn't land. Cole's jaw went hard. Hands where I can see them. He sounded louder now, the way some men get when they're trying to drown out their own pulse. I could see his left hand shake and his right hand drift toward his holster, slow at first, then faster when that tremor scared him. Adrenaline has a smell. You can taste it when it fills a place you thought was safe. Marcus nodded, once small, controlled. He moved like choreography, deliberate, careful enough for a camera. He reached for his jacket pocket, no rush, no flourish, just a man about to show who he is and why this moment should end quietly. Cole shouted before the pocket was halfway open. Don't I wish I could tell you there was time between the shout and the shot? There wasn't. The crack slammed the quiet to pieces. The clerk tore off his headphones. A coffee cup fell from my hand and burst at my feet, a brown flower spreading into rainwater. Marcus rocked back as if someone had cut the strings that kept him upright. He folded to the pavement with a groan, no louder than the rain. For a second, one of those seconds that feels like it holds a lifetime, nobody moved. Then something slid from Marcus's hand and kissed the wet ground with a cold tap. The canopy light caught it and threw a single line of truth at our feet, a government ID slick with rain, stamped in clean, unforgiving letters: Deputy Director, CIA Counterintelligence. Cole saw it when I did. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. The flashlight fell, beam spinning, making the scene look like it was blinking. He fumbled for his radio. Static. The rain suddenly seemed louder, like the world was trying to wash the moment away, and couldn't. Unit 4 report, the radio barked tinny, impatient, alive. Cole didn't answer. He was staring at the ID like it had bitten him. Marcus lay on his side. He didn't clutch at the wound. He didn't thrash. He blinked into the rain and looked up into the nowhere you look when you've already seen too much of the world. His lips moved around a breath that might have been a word. I stepped forward, then stopped. Training I didn't have told me to keep my hands visible, to keep my voice small. Another part of me wanted to put my palm against the hole and tell him to hold on. I did nothing. Fear does that. It turns your best intentions into statues. The horizon changed first. Out beyond the highway, a string of headlights gathered like a necklace pulled taut. Low and heavy, the growl of engines rolled over the asphalt. I heard it in my chest before I understood it in my head. The clerk whispered, "What the?" and forgot the rest. Cole looked right then, left animal-wide. In the wet reflection of the blacktop, I saw shapes forming SUVs, more than a few moving, like they had a line to draw and no time to explain it. Not sirens, not local. The kind of movement that says someone important is hurt and someone powerful is already on the way. The first vehicle shot into the station brakes, whispering doors opening in a tight rhythm. A woman in a dark field jacket stepped out rain, finding the brim of her cap and dripping in a perfect line. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Pentagon units inbound, stand down. A voice behind her carried the order like a verdict. Figures in black spread to the edges, hands sure, eyes colder than the night. One of them swept a green beam across the pavement and found the ID. He lifted it gently, blinked once, then looked to the woman and gave a small nod that said everything. Cole lifted his hands automatically, as if gravity had changed and they needed new instructions. He reached for something he stammered, like that might rewind time if he said it the right way. The woman later I'd learned her name, Colonel Evelyn Hart, didn't look at him first. She looked at Marcus, then at the wound, then at the ID in her agent's glove. When she did turn to Cole, her voice came like a knife wrapped in cloth. He reached for his ID officer. "And you just shot the deputy director of the CIA." I could feel the words land on him. He sagged as if someone had cut a rope around his spine. Two agents stepped in clean, practiced, and relieved him of his weapon. The radio on his shoulder crackled another demand for a report and got only the sound of rain for its trouble. In the distance, the air trembled. Then the tremble became a roar. Helicopters. Not news choppers. These had weight. They came low wind, ripping the rain sideways, rotor wash, beating the canopy until it rattled in its bolts. The ground crew barely looked up. They'd done this dance before. "Perimeter," the colonel said, and men and women became a circle that turned the gas station into a scene with borders. Lockdown cameras. Secure the vehicle. Another agent knelt by Marcus with a kit and a voice you use for family in bad moments. "Sir, stay with me." Cole's lips moved like he wanted to borrow a story that would fit. None did. When he finally found sound, it sounded like regret borrowed from a stranger. I thought. "You thought wrong," the colonel said. "No heat. Just fact." She lifted her chin at the ID. "This is a federal scene. Then to the air, to all of us and none of us. Retaliation begins now." The clerk had his phone out, hands shaking, filming, as if the lens could make sense of the surge. Across the pumps, a soldier raised a palm without looking, and the phone drifted down like it had been asked nicely by a parent. I stepped back until my shoulders met the cold glass of the station door. Inside, the coffee machine whirred to life like it too had decided it was safer to keep busy. They brought a stretcher. The flag came. Where do they keep a flag on a night like this? And it unfolded with a grace that felt like apology. They lifted Marcus with a reverence that told me they knew him or had been trained to treat the unknown as sacred until proven otherwise. The colonel walked beside the stretcher, not leading, not following. Just there, the rain had soaked her shoulders. She didn't seem to notice. Cole stood alone, hands cuffed the red-blue flash of a single cruiser, finally blooming, too late, too local. He kept staring at the place where the badge had fallen, as if the ground might explain how a night could turn from ordinary to irreversible in the time it takes for a hand to move 6 inches. The helicopters settled in their hold engines low ready. The SUVs idled like heartbeats. Somewhere a line had been crossed that could not be uncrossed, and the men and women who arrive when the country's nerves light up had already taken the field. That's how it started. One shot, one badge on wet pavement, and the sky answering with steel and rotor, and the kind of silence that follows a promise. Within minutes, the Pentagon was here. I didn't think the night could get louder until the Black Hawks dropped in like thunder you could touch. 3 of them, noses down rotors, chopping the rain into mist. White floodlights swept the station, and every shadow vanished. The price signs, the vending machines, the trembling clerk beside me, everything went from nighttime to operating room bright in a blink. Doors slammed open in a rhythm. I'll never forget. Thunk, 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 and a column of black-clad agents flowed out like they were poured. No shouting, no wasted motion. The kind of quiet that means authority doesn't need volume. At the center was a woman whose presence told the rest of us where to stand without saying it. Tall under a dark-capped field jacket, weighted with purpose. Colonel Evelyn Hart. I didn't know the name yet, but I knew a leader when I saw one. She took in the scene with one sweep. Marcus on the pavement, the ID in a gloved hand, Officer Cole standing cuffed and pale me, and the clerk pressed to the glass. She didn't waste a second on questions she already had answers to. Cole found his voice first, tripping over it. He reached for something. The colonel's eyes never flinched. His ID, Officer Cole. She nodded toward the badge in her agent's palm, the letters shining clean and merciless. You shot the deputy director of the CIA. There it was, flat, final, a verdict without theatrics. You could feel the words settle on Cole like wet cement. His knees didn't buckle. His confidence did. He looked smaller under the lights, as if the rain had been washing away more than water. An unmarked sedan fishtailed into the far end of the lot and came to a hard stop. A man in a tan coat jumped out, umbrella flaring, voice already raised. This is my jurisdiction. He was all county swagger and sleepless eyes. Chief Douglas Reed. Colonel Hart didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Not anymore. She held his stare for a beat, just long enough to teach him the new temperature of the air. The Pentagon just took control. Reed slowed like a punch he couldn't stop. You could see him doing the math, press, politics, pensions, and coming up short. An agent stepped between him and the scene without touching him, the kind of barrier you don't test if you like the bones in your wrists. Evidence, the colonel said, and the team moved. One agent bagged the ID with the care you reserve for relics. Another slid Marcus's phone into a Faraday pouch. A third held up a small device, tiny lights flickering. Beacon activated 3 minutes before the shot, he reported. The colonel's jaw tightened. She didn't make a speech. She just bent closer to the sound of her own conclusion. He knew he was in danger, she said almost to herself. He called us before dying. It landed in me like a second bullet. This hadn't been random to him. He'd felt the weather change and set the alarm. He reached for the truth, and the truth arrived in helicopters. Perimeter teams stretched outward, and the station shrank into a clean circle of procedure. Military SUVs, nose to nose, sealed the entrances. Blue chem lights winked into place like a new constellation. A pair of agents moved the clerk and me to a patch of dry under the awning, checked our names, our phones, our pockets, our patience. Out by the road, phones lifted anyway, people who'd pulled over to the shoulder drawn by the engines and the light. Someone's live stream caught the sweep of a rotor and the snap of a command camera's down. For a heartbeat, the world saw it, the country's hand closing into a fist, and then feeds stuttered, blacked, or pivoted away like they'd been nudged by an invisible finger. Reed watched it all with the color draining out of him. His badge still sat straight, his authority didn't. He tried one last line, a smaller voice wearing all the old clothes. I need my people inside the tape. Colonel Hart looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a bystander clutching a dirty rag. Your people will submit their reports. My people will preserve the truth. She turned without waiting to see if the sentence found its mark. 2 medics knelt beside Marcus. They worked with the kind of gentleness that makes you believe they could talk a body into staying. Sir, stay with me, one said, hand steady at the neck, eyes on the pupil. He didn't pretend. He didn't promise. He just stayed. Cole stood 5 steps away, wrists cinched the rotor wash, pressing his uniform flat. The helicopter lights washed his face in hard white, no shadows left to hide in. He tried to meet the colonel's eyes. She gave him a truth colder than rain. You didn't just shoot a man, she said. You shot a message to the whole country. I swear he flinched like the sentence had weight. Maybe it did. Maybe some words are heavier because they're carved from consequence. More vehicles arrived, marked, unmarked, all of them moving like they'd rehearsed this night 1,000 times in rooms without windows. A portable mast rose from the back of a truck, a dish yawning to drink the sky. Radios tightened into a single frequency. The place where I'd bought gas 100 careless times became a nerve ending for the Republic. An agent with a camera the size of a fist swept the ground, mapping footprints. Tire bites the path of a life across wet concrete. Another pinned evidence markers that glowed like small moons. They tagged the coffee cup that had exploded at my shoes. They tagged the shell casing that sat like a period at the end of a sentence no one had wanted to write. Someone asked for next of kin. The colonel didn't answer out loud, but her eyes said she knew the name, the address, the way that phone would sound when it broke a home in half. Load, she said softly. The stretcher rolled in wheels, whispering canvas crisp. I don't know where the flag came from, whether it lives in every case like this, or whether someone carried it in his heart until he needed it, but it appeared and it covered him, and the rain respected it. The medics lifted with reverence. The colonel walked alongside the way you walk with a friend when you can't fix their night anymore, but you can keep them company to the edge of it. Reed took a step forward, then stopped as two agents adjusted their stance by an inch. That inch was the difference between past tense and present consequence. He turned away and pretended to make a call to no one. Behind us, Cole stared at the ground where the badge had been, like answers might still be pooling there. The helicopter light found every line in his face and didn't erase any of them. The cuffs clicked once as he shifted a punctuation mark he couldn't swallow. I thought of Naomi's text on Marcus's screen, "Come home safe," and I hated the rain for not being thicker, for not hiding us from each other. The stretcher slid toward the nearest Black Hawk. The rotor wind picked up, pulling the flag tight, then letting it breathe again. Agents formed two silent ranks. No salute, this wasn't a ceremony. It was a promise, kept too late. "Move," the crew chief called, and they did. The colonel paused at the base of the ramp. She looked back just once, past the tape, past Reed, past me at the place where the night had cracked. Whatever she measured there, it didn't change her angle. She climbed in. The helicopters lifted in staggered sequence, the ground falling away, the lights shrinking. The circle loosened but didn't dissolve. SUVs held the line. Evidence text kept working. The rain kept telling the pavement the same story over and over. When the last rotor faded to a distant churn, the night exhaled. We were left with red strobes from the remaining units, the hiss of tires on the highway, and the knowledge that nothing about this town or this country would feel as simple in the morning. That's what within minutes looks like when the badge on the ground says the quiet part out loud. One shot, one truth. And then the sky arrives to make sure the rest of the story can't lie. Morning didn't come quiet. It came with sirens, headlines, and a kind of disbelief that rattled through every kitchen in America. Phones lit up before the sun. Did police shoot unarmed black man? The clips spread like lightning. Marcus Hale's body on the pavement, rain still falling. A woman's voice somewhere off camera screaming he wasn't armed. By noon, the gas station was buried under flowers and flags. People came from miles away, holding signs scrawled in marker "Justice for Marcus Hale." The smell of candle wax mixed with gasoline. Someone played gospel through a small speaker. For a place that once smelled like oil and silence, it now pulsed with prayer and anger. Then came the press conference. Chief Douglas Reed stood behind a wooden podium, chin, high, uniform pressed sharp. Cameras blinked like eyes waiting for truth. His words came measured, rehearsed, hollow. The suspect resisted arrest. That single line cracked the country open. It didn't sound like law. It sounded like a lie. Within an hour, his sentence was carved into every protest sign and every angry tweet. The public didn't see a suspect. They saw a man who'd served his country and was betrayed by it. A young reporter, Lydia Morgan, wouldn't let the story die the way others had. She dug through archives until she found a photo, Marcus Hale, in a blue suit shaking hands with the CIA director at a medal ceremony. Her voice quivered when she went live on air. He wasn't a suspect. He was a national hero. The networks picked it up instantly. By evening, every major outlet ran the same loop, Marcus in uniform, then Marcus in the rain. The anchors spoke slower now, careful with their words. Marcus Hale, Deputy Director of Counterintelligence. He trained federal agents on bias ethics. It was the kind of twist that didn't just shock, it shamed. Every living room in America was forced to see the contradiction. The man who taught law enforcement how not to shoot too soon had been shot too soon. At home in Richmond, Ruth Hale, Marcus's mother, faced a wall of microphones outside her porch. She was small, gray-haired, her voice breaking like glass as she said, "My son fought wars abroad, not here. He came home to serve this country, and this is how it thanked him." Even the reporters lowered their cameras when she cried. You could hear the shaking breath of the crowd, white, black, uniformed civilian, like a single human exhale. Meanwhile, behind a closed office door, Chief Reed watched the broadcast. The cup in his hand cracked against the desk. He stared at the screen as Ruth's face filled it. His voice dropped to a whisper, not meant for anyone. "God help me. What did we do?" It was the first time he said "we," the first time his armor cracked. By nightfall, the protests stretched beyond Virginia. New York, Atlanta, Chicago, Seattle, each city lit up with candles and cardboard signs. Helicopter shots from above looked like rivers of light moving through streets that had seen too many marches before. People chanted in rhythm with the heartbeat of drums and rain on umbrellas, "Justice now, justice now." The footage went global. In London, someone projected Marcus's face onto Parliament's stone walls. In South Africa, a news anchor called him the man who reminded America of its mirror. The world was watching a country wake up to its own reflection. And somewhere deep inside the Pentagon, beneath the fluorescent calm, Colonel Evelyn Hart stood in a briefing room watching the same footage with her jaw tight. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She only muttered a single line that none of the cameras caught. He warned them this would happen. By midnight, you couldn't scroll without seeing his name. Marcus Hale wasn't just a man anymore. He'd become a movement, one born out of rain, silence, and the sound of a gun that never should have fired. America had awakened. And this time it wasn't going back to sleep. They sealed the Pentagon conference room like a vault. No phones, no press, no daylight. The walls hummed faintly from the weight of classified air. A long table sat under too much light, every chair filled with brass and titles. No one smiled. The flag in the corner didn't move. It just watched. At the head sat the Secretary of Defense, jaw-tight eyes red-rimmed from sleepless briefings. Beside him, Colonel Evelyn Hart stood with her arms folded, reins still on her shoulders. Across from her was General Arthur Mendez, an older man whose face carried the kind of sadness you only see in soldiers who've outlived good men. The secretary broke the silence first. "Let's get this over with. What the hell was Hale doing at that gas station?" Mendez slid a file across the table, thick and sealed with blue tape. His voice came low, firm. "He wasn't rogue," he said. "Marcus Hale was working an internal investigation, one that cut deep into domestic law enforcement. Systemic corruption. Racism embedded in police contracts. He believed federal oversight was being undermined." The secretary's eyes narrowed. "You're saying he was investigating us, not us," Mendez replied. "Them. The cities where the money disappears. The departments where the complaints vanish." Evelyn leaned forward, tapping a remote. The screen on the far wall flickered alive. Grainy security footage from the gas station, the final minutes of Marcus's life. They all watched in silence. Marcus stood calm, his hands empty. The officer shouted. The gun flashed. Then the slow fall. The badge hitting the wet pavement. When the screen went black, you could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights again. The secretary's voice cracked through it. "This footage doesn't leave this room." Evelyn didn't flinch. "Sir, he wasn't armed. He was trying to show identification." The secretary slammed his hand down. "You think I don't see that. You think I don't care. But if this story spins out of control, it'll tear the country apart. You'll have protests in every major city, half the police force resigning, Congress screaming for blood. We contain this. No leaks." Evelyn's expression didn't change, but her tone could have frozen the air. "He died for the truth," she said quietly. "You can't bury it twice." The room went still. Even the secretary blinked. Mendez cleared his throat, gently breaking the tension. "Sir Marcus left something behind. You'll want to see it." When the meeting ended, Mendez caught Evelyn in the corridor. The marble floors echoed with the sound of everything left unsaid. He handed her a folder, stamped, "Classified, Project Blue Line." She frowned. "What's this? His last case?" Mendez said. "He found something he shouldn't have. A corruption network linking city police departments to private defense contractors. Kickbacks, weapons transfers, money laundered through training programs. He thought the rot went high. He was right." She opened the file and scanned the pages. Each sheet hit harder than the last names, signatures, payment routes. At the top of the hierarchy, Chief Douglas Reed. Her hand trembled just once before she forced it still. Mendez watched her. "He told me if anything happened to him to trust you." Evelyn closed the folder. "Then this doesn't stay buried." When he left, she sat in her office, under the low hum of the Pentagon's artificial calm. She flipped open one last page in the file and froze. Tucked between the documents was a photograph. Marcus and Naomi laughing in the sunlight, his arm around her shoulders, her eyes half closed from the brightness. A moment too human for a man who spent his life in the shadows. Her throat tightened. She set the photo aside like it was glass. Outside her window, the Capitol looked normal. Cars moving, tourists, walking flags, waving in the fall wind. But inside that folder was a map of something poisonous running beneath it all. A truth too heavy to hide and too dangerous to expose. Somewhere miles away in a quiet Virginia home, Naomi Hale sat on the couch with Marcus's phone still on the coffee table. Its screen was cracked, but the battery hadn't died yet. His contact photo, the one of him smiling in his blue suit, still glowed faintly. She stared at it for a long time, her face unreadable, her hand resting over her heart, as if to keep it from falling apart. She didn't cry loudly. She didn't curse. Just one tear slipped down, tracing her jaw like a confession. The house was silent, but the world outside was not. Protest chants rolled through the distance like thunder. And on a desk inside the Pentagon, the folder marked Project Blue Line waited for someone brave enough to open it again. That was the moment the story changed course, from a shooting to a reckoning. And somewhere in the echo of all that silence, the truth began to stir. They kept Officer Raymond Cole in a holding cell deep beneath the county precinct. No window, no clock, just the hum of the vent that never stopped. The metal bench was cold enough to remind him what he'd done, even when he tried not to think about it. The first 2 days, he didn't talk. He didn't eat much either. The guards didn't bother him, not because they pitied him, but because they didn't know which version of him might answer. When Chief Douglas Reed finally came, his shoes echoed down the corridor before the door opened. Cole looked up, eyes, sunken jaw clenched. Reed didn't sit. He just stood there, coat still on rain, dripping from the brim of his hat. "Stick to the story," Reed said. His voice was a whisper wrapped in authority. "You feared for your life." He reached for a gun. "You hesitated and you fired. That's it. You understand?" Cole didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the metal table between them, where a small puddle of water from Reed's coat gathered in silence. After a moment, Cole spoke almost to himself. He looked calm. He said the words dragging out like they weighed something. "Too calm." Reed frowned. "What does that mean?" Cole blinked slowly. "It means—" He didn't look scared of me, not even angry. Just calm. Like he already knew how this night would end. The chief's jaw tightened. "You need to stop thinking like that. This isn't about how he looked, it's about what you felt. Fear. You understand, fear is what the jury believes." Cole lifted his eyes for the first time. "I wasn't afraid," he said quietly. "Not until after." The chief froze. Before he could respond, the door buzzed open and a young officer slipped in. Dean, barely 25, the kind of cop who still believed the badge could save people. He handed Reed a file, but his eyes landed on Cole. There was no salute, no respect, just something heavy like disappointment. When Reed left, Dean lingered a second longer. "You know," he said, voice low, "he wasn't your threat. He was your mirror." Cole squinted. "What the hell does that mean?" Dean met his stare calm. "He showed you what power looks like when it doesn't need to yell." Then he turned and walked out. Cole laughed, short, bitter. "He looked at me like I was small," he muttered to the empty room. "Like I didn't matter." The words hung there louder than the vent. Later that night, they gave him the official footage for his statement, they said. He hit play. The screen flickered with rain-static headlights, and there it was again, the moment that wouldn't leave him. Marcus's calm voice. "You don't want to do this." The slow reach for the wallet. The flash. The sound. The silence after. Cole's hand trembled. He paused it at the moment the badge hit the ground, the letters CIA catching the light. His own reflection stared back at him from the screen, pale, wide-eyed, unblinking. He slammed his fist against the table so hard the metal rang. "I thought he'd shoot me," he shouted, as if the walls might accept the excuse better than he could. "I thought he'd, but there was no gun. There never was. Only the wallet. Only his own fear shaped into a bullet." That night, sleep didn't come easy. When it finally did, it didn't stay kind. In the dark of his dream, Marcus stood on the other side of the glass, dry and upright, not a mark on him. His voice was the same as before, calm, patient, measured. Was it worth it? Cole tried to speak, but the air felt thick. He pressed his palms against the glass, but Marcus didn't move closer. He just looked at him, the same steady gaze from that night. Not angry, not forgiving, just true. Cole woke up, gasping, sweat clinging to his neck. The vent hummed again, the same unchanging tone. He dragged himself to the small mirror, bolted to the wall, the kind they put in cells so you can't break it. His reflection looked back, eyes hollow, skin gray under the flickering light. "He looked at me like I was the monster," Cole whispered. His throat tightened. And he was right. He sank back onto the bench, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, the silence in the room didn't feel empty. It felt like judgment. Outside, the building was stirring. The officers in the hallway whispered in clusters. One of them had the evening news playing low on a phone, the anchor's voice clear enough to drift through the bars. "Breaking tonight, Officer Raymond Cole officially charged with second-degree murder. The Pentagon has requested federal oversight in the case." The words echoed through the corridor, bouncing off the walls until they found him. In another part of the city, Naomi Hale sat on her couch, the same phone still glowing on the table. When the news reached her, she didn't smile. She just closed her eyes, whispering something too soft to hear. For a long moment, the world stood still, the guilty man in his cell, the widow in her quiet house, and the memory of the one who'd forced them both to face the truth. That was the night the badge began to rust. They said she'd been silent for weeks. No interviews, no statements, no tears in public. But when Naomi Hale finally stepped out of her house and into the sea of cameras, the world stopped pretending not to care. She stood straight, black coat hair, pulled tight eyes, steady like steel, that had forgotten how to bend. The street outside her gate was packed shoulder to shoulder, reporters, neighbors, protesters, soldiers. Some came to grieve, some came to gawk. But every lens turned when she walked down those 3 steps. A young reporter, trembling but brave enough to ask, called out, "Mrs. Hale, do you want revenge?" Naomi didn't blink. Her voice was quiet but carved from something sharp. "My husband believed silence could save him," she said. It didn't. No one dared ask another question. The clip aired that night on every major network. People called her tone-cold. Others called it controlled. But those who really watched, the ones who knew what grief looks like when it runs out of tears, saw something else: purpose. 2 days later, Colonel Evelyn Hart came to see her. No cameras this time, no uniforms, just 2 women sitting across from each other at Naomi's kitchen table. The curtains were half drawn. The light hit the framed photo of Marcus on the counter, the one taken before a White House dinner, his smile effortless, his tie crooked the way Naomi always fixed after the picture was taken. For a long time, neither woman spoke. The only sound was the faint tick of the wall clock. Evelyn had seen 1,000 briefings, 100 war zones, but she'd never been in a room where silence felt this alive. Finally, Naomi slid something across the table, a small black USB drive. Her hand didn't shake. "He told me," she said, voice low, "if they ever call him a suspect, show them this." Evelyn picked it up, turning it between her fingers. "What's on it?" Naomi exhaled, almost a whisper. "The reason he died." Evelyn plugged it into her laptop. The screen came to life, rows of spreadsheets, coded emails, surveillance logs, payments moving through fake charities, shell accounts, city budgets that bled in the dark. At the top of the chart, stamped in digital ink, one name blinked back at them: Chief Douglas Reed. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the truth itself had a temperature. Naomi leaned back, her eyes glistening but unbroken. "He didn't die by accident," she said. "He was silenced." Evelyn's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She didn't deny it, didn't soften it. She just looked up, meeting Naomi's gaze with the kind of resolve that doesn't make promises, it makes plans. "Then we'll make him speak again," she said, louder than they ever could. It wasn't a pact, it was a declaration. Evelyn copied the files, sealed the drive in a protective case, and stood. "Do you understand what happens once this goes public?" she asked. Naomi nodded once. "I do." Evelyn hesitated. "You could be in danger." Naomi smiled faintly, and for the first time since the shooting, there was warmth in it, an almost cruel kind of peace. "I already was," she said. Evelyn left, but not before glancing at Marcus's photo. The eyes in that frame looked the same as the day she'd last seen him, watchful, knowing like he was still part of the plan. When the door shut, Naomi sat back down at the table. The clock ticked again. The rain started outside, soft and rhythmic, the same way it had fallen the night he died. She reached for her phone, opened the news app. The headline read, "Officer Cole faces federal charges. Chief Reed under scrutiny." Naomi traced her finger over the words, then swiped to the video of her own press interview. She listened to her voice one more time, cold, calm, and alive with meaning. In the corner of the screen, she caught a glimpse of Marcus's reflection from that photo again. It wasn't a trick of light. It was memory breathing. She whispered to the empty room, "They thought ending you would end this." Then she stood straight in her coat and looked at his picture one more time. The pain was still there, but so was something stronger. Her eyes sharpened, glowing, not with tears but with resolve. "This isn't over," she said softly. And for the first time since the night it all began, the house didn't feel like a tomb anymore. It felt like a beginning. When the truth finally moved, it didn't whisper, it roared. Inside a dim office at Langley, Colonel Evelyn Hart met with Jerome Watts, a wiry data engineer whose hoodie and tired eyes didn't match the clean walls of the CIA. He was an old friend of Marcus Hale, one of the few who still called him brother. The glow from 3 monitors painted their faces in blue light. Jerome tapped the USB drive Naomi had given Evelyn. "You're sure this is what he wanted?" Evelyn nodded. "He risked his life for it." Jerome slid the drive in the screen, filling with encrypted strings. "Then let's finish what he started." For hours, the room pulsed with the rhythm of keystrokes and low hums from the machines. Lines of code untangled themselves like vines being cut loose. Then with a soft beep, the data unfolded a full map of corruption. Cities, names, bank accounts, police chiefs. One at the top, Douglas Reed. Jerome leaned back, whistling low. This isn't just a bad apple. This is the whole orchard. Evelyn's tone sharpened. How fast can you get this out? He met her eyes. Once it's uploaded, there's no taking it back. That's the point, she said. 10 minutes later, every news outlet in the country received the same anonymous file. Within an hour, headlines screamed across every screen: CIA deputy director killed while exposing police corruption. The story spread faster than any press release ever could. By morning, the leak had hit international wires. People didn't just read it, they felt it. Every name on that list was a wound reopened, every number a receipt for betrayal. Meanwhile, in his office, Chief Douglas Reed slammed a fist on his desk hard enough to rattle the blinds. "Find who leaked it," he barked. Every computer, every phone, locked them down. A young sergeant stammered, "Sir, we can't. The FBI's already here." Reed froze. What? Before the words could leave his mouth, the sound of boots echoed down the hallway. The blinds flashed red and blue. Outside, rows of black SUVs with FBI and Pentagon insignias rolled up to the curb. Soldiers stepped out first, then agents in dark suits. Their movements were clean, rehearsed, terrifyingly silent. An amplified voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "This facility is now under federal control. All officers disarm and step outside." Reed's throat went dry. "You can't do this. I'm still chief of not anymore," came the answer from the hall. The front doors burst open. FBI agents swept through the building, methodical and unbothered by the shouting. One by one, city officers were led outside, weapons stacked in a growing pile that glittered under the morning sunday. Across the street, the press had already arrived. Cameras rolled as uniformed soldiers lined up each officer, removing their badges with careful precision. It wasn't punishment, it was purification. Inside, Reed's voice cracked as he yelled, "I train these men. You think I'll let Washington treat us like criminals?" But no one answered. The chain of command had moved past him. At that same hour on national television, Naomi Hale appeared again. This time, she wasn't outside her home, but seated under bright studio lights. Her tone was calm, her grief carved into something far stronger. "You can bury a man," she said, her eyes steady on the camera, but not the truth. No music, no graphics, just her voice. And somehow that was enough. The clip went viral within minutes. Churches replayed it during Sunday service. Schools quoted it in morning announcements. Even hardened news anchors paused mid-broadcast, letting her words hang in the air. In a small house in Richmond, Ruth Hale sat on her couch wrapped in a quilt Marcus had given her years ago. The television flickered with Naomi's face. Ruth smiled faintly, whispering, "That's my boy." Her hands folded over her lap, trembling not from age but from pride. Back at the city precinct, the transformation was almost biblical. Reporters lined the barricades, cameras panning over the sight of police officers, men who once strutted in power, now standing quietly as soldiers removed their name tags. The air was thick, heavy, electric. A captain stepped forward, tears in his eyes, and unclipped his own badge before anyone could order him to. He set it on the ground, whispering, "For him." And then, as if the universe wanted to record the moment for history, a single camera zoomed in on the biggest symbol of them all, the large metal sign above the front doors that read, "Reed County Police." Two soldiers climbed ladders on either side, loosened the bolts, and lifted the sign down piece by piece. The crowd gasped. Reporters spoke over one another. Someone in the back started clapping, and within seconds the sound spread, soft at first, then swelling into applause. That image, the soldiers holding the fallen sign under the morning light, traveled around the world before sunset. For the first time, it wasn't just a protest. It was proof. The system that had buried Marcus Hale was now unearthing itself one badge at a time. And watching it unfold, Colonel Evelyn Hart stood on the Pentagon balcony, phone in hand, watching the live coverage. The wind caught her hair, but her eyes never left the screen. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just whispered, almost like a prayer, "He's speaking again." And somehow, across the noise of engines and crowds, it felt like he was. The courthouse was packed before sunrise. Reporters lined the marble steps, cameras flashing like heat lightning. The nation was watching live. Every news network carried the same feed, the trial of Officer Raymond Cole. Inside, the air felt heavier than stone. Every seat filled, every whisper hushed the moment the judge entered. Cole sat at the defense table, hands folded, head bowed so low his tie brushed the wood. Behind him, Chief Douglas Reed stared straight ahead, expression carved from arrogance and fear. He still believed he could slip through the cracks of a system he once commanded. The prosecutor stood, voice steady. Your Honor, the people will show that Officer Cole shot an unarmed man who identified himself a federal agent acting within his duty. Then came the footage. The screen lowered. The lights dimmed. For 47 seconds, the room watched the rain again. The headlights, the hesitation, then the gunshot. When the sound echoed through the courtroom, speakers no one breathed. You could hear the faint whir of the projector, the tick of the clock, someone stifling a sob. Cole's lawyer tried to look at the screen, then couldn't. Even the jurors flinched. The video ended on the frozen image of Marcus's ID glinting in the rain. The prosecutor turned. Officer Dean, please take the stand. Dean walked up, still in uniform, cap under his arm. He spoke softly, but every word landed with weight. He didn't resist, Dean said. He tried to show his ID. I saw it. I heard him say, you don't want to do this. The judge leaned forward. You're certain? Dean nodded. I'd bet my badge on it. Reed shifted in his seat, eyes darting to Cole, the silent plea of a drowning man reaching for another sinking one. Then it happened. Cole started shaking. He buried his face in his hands and said, hoarse and broken, I thought he'd shoot me. I thought he'd... His voice cracked, but he didn't. He never would have. No one clapped. No one gasped. The truth didn't need an audience. It just needed air. From the gallery, General Arthur Mendez stood in full uniform. He walked slowly to the witness stand, saluted the judge, then turned to face the room. His medals caught the light, but his expression was pure grief. Deputy Director Marcus Hale, he said, voice ringing through the chamber, was the Deputy Director of CIA Counterintelligence. A patriot, a man who protected this nation from enemies seen and unseen until one found him wearing a badge. The judge's gavel struck once for silence, but it was too late. The room had already changed. Every person inside felt smaller, more human, more ashamed. Naomi Hale rose from her seat. She walked toward the front, steady as the truth itself. Her eyes found Cole's, and for a moment he couldn't look away. You never asked who he was, she said. Simple. Final. Like the closing of a door. Cole started to cry. Real tears this time. The kind that come when excuses finally stop working. Reed tried to stand to protest to salvage the scraps of his legacy, but the bailiff's hand on his shoulder kept him seated. The cameras caught it, the hand, the silence, the look of a man realizing his story had reached its last page. The judge cleared his throat. Mr. Cole, stand. Cole rose trembling. The courtroom waited. Even the air held its breath. The clock on the wall ticked once, then stopped. Or maybe no one could hear it anymore. For the killing of Deputy Director Marcus Hale, the judge said this court finds you guilty of second-degree murder. A soft gasp moved through the crowd. The judge turned to Reed. For obstruction of justice and abuse of authority, guilty. Cole closed his eyes. Reed's face went pale, the color draining like rain from chalk. And then silence. Heavy, absolute. You could only hear breathing. Naomi covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking, not from relief but from something deeper, the exhaustion of holding on too long. Evelyn Hart, watching from the back, lowered her head. Mendez closed his eyes and whispered something like a prayer. When the gavel came down one last time, the sound echoed like closure, not loud, not triumphant, but final. Naomi wept quietly. For Marcus, for the years they wouldn't have. For the country that finally, if only for a moment, remembered how to listen. That day justice didn't roar. It whispered. And everyone heard it. A full year passed, and from the ashes of one man's death, something extraordinary was born. The Pentagon courtyard was filled again, this time not with soldiers or cameras, but with students. Fresh uniforms, new badges, untested ideals. Above the entrance in tall silver letters, the sign read, The Marcus Hale Academy. It was more than a school. It was a promise, a national program to train police officers in ethics, racial equity, and human rights, funded directly by the Pentagon itself. Every recruit would learn not just how to enforce the law, but how to protect the dignity behind it. Naomi Hale walked through the gates, slowly holding a neatly folded flag, the same one that had been draped over Marcus's casket a year ago. Her hand tightened around it as if still feeling the weight of his absence. The young cadets stood in silence as she passed. They knew who she was. They knew why this place existed. On the stage, Colonel Evelyn Hart stepped up to the podium. The wind lifted her hair just slightly as she began. He died with dignity, she said, her voice steady but lived for truth. This academy exists so that no officer will ever again mistake courage for fear or silence for safety. Marcus Hale taught us that the hardest part of serving your country is remembering who you serve, all of it, not just the part that looks like you. Applause rose slow and respectful, not loud, the kind that carries weight. Moments later, a White House aide approached the stage and handed Evelyn an envelope marked with the presidential seal. She opened it, glanced down, then read aloud, "To the family of Deputy Director Marcus Hale, your son's courage changed our nation. His integrity reshaped the heart of justice. He reminded us that patriotism isn't loud, it's steady. And because of him, America is stronger." The letter was signed in blue ink, "The President of the United States." As the ceremony ended, Ruth Hale stood by the gate, small and quiet in her Sunday coat. She didn't go inside. She didn't need to. She just looked at the Academy sign and whispered half to herself, "He finally came home." Her words carried in the wind, soft but clear enough for Naomi to hear from across the courtyard. Naomi turned slightly, smiled through tears, and nodded. Later that evening, Naomi visited Arlington, where Marcus rested among rows of white headstones. The sun was setting, washing everything in amber light. She knelt, brushing a hand over his name, then reached into her coat and placed an envelope at the base of the stone. It was the letter from Cole, the one he'd written from prison. On the front, in his shaky handwriting, it said, "For Mrs. Hale." Naomi whispered almost to the earth itself, "Even monsters can learn." She stayed there for a long moment, the wind moving gently through the trees. Somewhere behind her, the Academy flag was being raised for the first time. Then came the narrator's voice, calm, reflective, like the final breath after a storm. "Justice doesn't scream. It endures quietly but completely." The camera panned upward, the sound of wind softening to near silence. The scene cut to the Pentagon corridor, where Marcus's portrait now hung among those of fallen heroes. His photo caught a beam of light from the skylight above, enough to illuminate the words engraved beneath the frame. "Truth might be late, but it never loses its way." And as the light glowed brighter, the story closed, not with vengeance, not with noise, but with the kind of peace that justice leaves behind when it finally arrives. Justice, in its truest form, isn't about revenge. It's about courage, truth, and the quiet strength to do what's right when no one's watching. Marcus Hale's story reminds us that real heroes don't fight for power. They fight for principle. And even when they fall, their truth continues to rise. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in justice, and subscribe to Mr. Mac's Stories for more powerful, meaningful stories like this one. Your support means more than numbers. It's what gives our creative team the strength to keep bringing real human stories to life. Because here on Mr. Mac's Stories, truth always finds its way home.